Welcome back to the show. Now, the American energy market has undergone a profound change in recent years with a boom in shale oil and gas production. US energy expert Karen Harbert spoke on the issue when she visited Sydney this week. Harbert is the president of the Institute for the 21st Century Energy, an arm of the US Chamber of Commerce. The Australian senior journalist Glenda Corporal caught up with her during her visit, and she began by asking her about the Institute's new survey, which warns that Australia's energy security rating is slipping.
Well, you know, your situation here is changing, and you're becoming more import dependent rather than less, even though you are an exporter. So it really is a question of, are you importing stuff from places that are, you know, less secure than you are? And the answer is yes. So that's something that you're going to have to address here in Australia.
So what could we do to make Australia's energy outlook a bit more secure?
Well, you've got a unique challenge. Your resources are broad, diverse across your entire geography, but there has to be a way to use more of your resources here and to use it to, power your economy. And you're also going to go through deregulation or re-regulation, if you will, of your electricity sector. And that's a big component to your economy and has to be managed very effectively.
The situation in the US has changed quite substantially, I understand. The energy security situation is actually improving compared with the rest of the world.
You know, we were on a very unsustainable path. Our energy security risks were going through the roof. In fact, last year was the highest on record. But now we're sitting on an untold amount of resources. And as long as we're able to get to them and we have reasonable but good regulation, this could be a game changer for the American economy. We're sort of facing our fiscal cliff in Washington, and we need jobs, we need revenue, and we need industry. And energy seems to be the solution to that.
So what's changed? I hear the US is awash with gas.
Well, you know, we didn't know we had all this gas because we didn't have the technology to unlock these resources. So we're combining several different types of technology to access this very hard to get to resource. And that is unlocking resources, in places that we didn't even know we had. Normally it was Texas and Oklahoma in the United States. And now we have 25 states that have these resources. So it's an amazing opportunity if done right.
There's been a lot of controversy about fracking. That's the process used to get this gas out of the ground. How serious is the situation? What's the real situation?
Well, I think in this case, the facts matter. We have been employing fracking in our country for 30 years. We've fracked 1 million wells, and now we're employing that technology in a more advanced manner. So the facts do matter there. But we also have to hold industry to the highest standards possible. We want this done environmentally responsibly. And that means the local regulators need to have their oversight done. They're closer to the resource. They should be looking after the resource.
Australia's looking at more coal seam gas. Are there any lessons from the US experience that we could take to Australia?
Absolutely. We had to go through a learning experience as well in the United States, which is what is the appropriate regulatory framework? Because we have a regulatory framework that was put in place before we even knew we had these resources. So in the states where we have a lot of unconventional gas and oil, the governors and the regulators have updated the frameworks to raise the industry standards and hold them accountable for their activity, but also the communities themselves are enjoying more resources. So it's a balancing act, but it's time to be part of the 21st century regulatory framework rather than the 20th century regulatory framework.
There's a lot of interest in Australia at the potential for the US to be exporting gas. We are, of course, a big gas exporter. Where do you see that going?
Well, you know, there is an opportunity, and obviously we have very low gas prices in America, and other places have higher prices. So people that are producing gas would like to be part of that. But the reality is we're not going to export every single molecule we produce in America simply because we have growing demand at home. Gas is replacing more and more coal-fired power in our country. Industry is returning, the chemical industry is returning, and that means we have growing demand for gas. I do think there's room to export, but I think there's growing demand all around the world for gas. So I don't see us in competition with Australia. I see it as an opportunity to be part of a growing market.
I gather there's a review by the US Department of Energy on future gas exports. Where do you think that will go?
Well, their analysis is showing that even under the most, aggressive scenarios, that the price of gas wouldn't go up by more than $1, natural gas. And that's probably a pretty low threshold. People could probably handle that given our low prices at the moment. They haven't made any conclusions. They haven't made any recommendations. They haven't said they're constrain exports. But the economic analysis seems to bear out that we can afford to do this, and that the benefits to our economy in terms of the manufacturing renaissance and all the economic benefits far outweigh the costs, the increased costs of natural gas.
Do you have a sense how much more the US could export And what markets will you be looking at?
Well, right now we only have one facility that's gotten a permit, and there's a number of other ones that would like to be part of the next batch, if you will. And I think the market will determine, and how fast we can bring it to market will also determine how much we can play. But clearly, there's a role for us to export nearby to Europe. Thereby, they would be less dependent on their single supplier almost of Russia. Japan clearly is in need of gas. You supply it to Japan. They're looking for more suppliers as they turn away from nuclear. And the developing countries are increasingly looking at gas as baseload power. So, but I don't think we all need to be worried about America being this huge player. We're just now bringing the supply on and are looking for a way to export some of it.
So what's the outlook for coal in the US and for coal exports?
Well, you know, coal has been our baseload source of power for a very long period of time, and we're seeing decreased demand for coal being replaced by gas. But I don't think the coal industry is over by any stretch of the imagination. Number one, we're exporting a lot more coal these days all around the world. But also, as technology continues to improve, there is room for, you know, new coal-fired capacity in our country. And, you know, that would be good. It's affordable, it's reliable, and it's baseload. So, you know, we can't write the obituary to the coal industry anytime soon in America.
So this change in the US from a country which has always been a big energy importer to a country which could even look at exporting energy, how does that change the world geopolitical situation?
Well, I think that's a great question. I mean, we certainly, if we become a bigger player in the market, there are tensions that will decrease. Certainly, as we're less reliant on the Middle East, but China's more reliant on the Middle East, that poses additional burdens on China and what they think about what's happening in the Middle East. I think it is an equalizer, because we'll be putting more molecules out there from a friendly country. Just like when Canada discovered its oil sands, the tensions in the market, in the oil market, were somewhat relieved because there was another supplier out there. So I think it is a win-win for the global market, for the American economy, for sure, and also for the OECD countries that look at energy as a platform for competitiveness.
What do you see as the outlook for world energy demand over the next few years, and where will that come from?
Well, we certainly see demand going up. In fact, between now and 2035, that may seem far away, but it's not that far away, demand around the world is going to go up by 50%. 50. What's different now is where that demand is coming from. 90% of that demand growth is from the developing world. China's now the largest energy consumer. India is obviously growing. But interestingly enough, the second fastest growing region for growth is the Middle East. So they'll be using more of their own molecules in the Middle East and having to sell more to meet the needs of their citizens. And that means their next customers. And their next customers are not us, or not the OECD countries. They are Asia. So that means very big changes for the global oil market, too.
So if you're looking at this increased energy demand around the world and increased energy supply, how does that net out? Are we still looking at rising energy prices?
Well, we do know that any forecast about an energy price has always been wrong. So whatever I said today would be wrong tomorrow. But clearly, with demand going up, we're going to need that additional supply. The good news for the market is there's new areas for that supply to be brought on, North America being one of them, the U.S. being a good, new, big player in that. But we're always going to have that very tightly met market between supply and demand. And the volatility that that brings is dangerous to economies. And for us in the United States, that's what makes this resource so important. It might be a way for us to weather some of the volatility out there to try and get our economy back on its feet.
Okay, the story of the US gas boom.